That's just how it's going. So we're talking about the process of forming togetherness and what that actually means, and how that can actually be facilitated in a way that makes it logical and understandable for people. And we're going to treat it from the perspective of um, evolution. So this is a togetherness for the purpose of personal evolution, as opposed to necessarily a togetherness for economic benefit or these sorts of things. So perhaps, Mariana, you could just explain some of those various reasons why people might be involved in togetherness, and then we can have a look at the personal evolution aspect of it.
Yes, this is a very interesting topic because normally, if you go into a community or form a togetherness, you would try to either share the financial topics to get it easier. So a lot of single moms or single parents will end up in communities. Or you look for to have it easier, maybe because the body doesn't work that good anymore, or you don't have the strength anymore, or you just can't cope with doing everything on your own anymore. So you're looking for support, which is the main topic for going into togetherness. Then other people are just deadly lonely. They can't find a relationship, so they will endeavor to go into a community and to solve the problem of being lonely. Then others have experimental reasons where they want to be in a community. They just want to experiment, maybe don't have a good family or don't have support from the family and looking for another kind of family, other
Yep.
kind of social net and social support. And then left are those who want to be in a community because they want to evolve. And maybe there are some in a community who just want to manifest a common cause. Just
Yeah.
like running a vegan restaurant, just for an example, just to form one example.
Yeah.
So you maybe have a community who together does run a vegan restaurant. So they are focusing on the common cause.
So there's a whole heap of things in there, isn't there? So like there's a common cause and economic opportunity. So the restaurant being a business that can support the people who are involved. There's the ethical and moral issues surrounding the business choice. So the choice of running a restaurant for vegan people. And obviously there's a lot of other things that come into it. And one of the as I introduced this and we started talking about it, I realized that there is also this aspect of a togetherness which is around about the topic of personal evolution, but for which it's people retreating into a structure. And I'm thinking here about a monastic or monastery
Mhm.
type of setting, or an ashram or something of that order. They're very fine things. I'm not for a moment criticizing these things, but nonetheless, it's people needing to be part of a community for the purpose of foregoing having to look after everything themselves. So it's a way out. For many people, it's a way out. And I know for myself, if I was to choose to go into an ashram or a monastery of some sort, perhaps a Buddhist monastery or something along those lines, which I could easily be attracted into, that would be something that which would attract, have attraction for me. It would all be about opting out. It would all be about not taking responsibility. It would be about there being a structure that I would just follow. I would be very consistently doing the prayers and following the structures and reading the teachings and these things. But underneath it all, I would actually be opting out of being responsible, myself. Now, you and I have had many conversations on this topic, and we know that to be a Buddha is to be responsible. It's not to opt out.
Definitely.
It's not to run away. It's not to avoid.
Yes, we talked a lot of times about lives we remember. And the most pleasant lives I remember was being in a Buddhist temple as a servant, just having to care about everything being orderly, dusting off the Buddhas and all the statues and caring for the flowers and everything there. And these were the easy lives, I remember. Very easy lives, very comforting lives. Such a pleasure to remember them.
Mm.
But of course, as I came back and came back and came back, these lives were not the most successful,
Mm.
considering personal development. Though being so pleasant, so full of harmony, so full of the divine.
Mm.
The lack obviously is the self-responsibility and being able to live a life full of responsibility and consideration and inner calmness, though being triggered all the time. Because in the temple, you're not very much triggered. Everybody knows how to behave. Everybody knows all the rules. Everybody will behave according to the rules. Nobody will be too close or too far away. It's all about compassion, and everybody knows it. It's just so easy. I guess you know what I mean.
Well, it's intriguing because what you're touching on here is that for evolution there has to be stress,
Definitely.
and, and the
It,
stress is largely absent in these type of structures that we're talking about. Curiously enough, these other reasons that you're talking about for people to come into a togetherness or a community of some sort, whether it be running the vegan restaurant or because we've run out of the horsepower to manage our families and we're struggling, and so therefore we want to have a community. All of those are avenues into stress because the moment you're in the community, you realize that you're actually in with a whole lot of other people like yourself who are struggling, and
definitely.
you're having to actually cope with all of that. You're having to cope with somebody who is wanting to be the boss and is bullying you around, or perhaps you're bullying other people around and they're having to be the victim. So there's many things that actually immediately are presented once you actually are deciding to get into a community on that basis. And perhaps what we could do is actually look at the comparison between all of those reasons. And another big reason we didn't cover there earlier why people form communities or go into communities is because they are not satisfied with the kind of family structures which are common. And so they're looking for a family structure which is based on, many more people. But they're thinking of it as a family, with all of the complexities of men and women and all of that type of thing in it as well. And so that would be another big general, way that people would actually be attracted into communities, is they decide that a nuclear family is not for them. That's not what they want. What they want is a community, and they want a
Yes.
community that's made up of many people from many genetic backgrounds and so on. Not just an extended family.
Yes, and generation, many generations being in that. When we think back 100 years, it is absolutely normal to have the aunties and the uncles around and their spouses and the cousins. There were a lot of people living on one property. Or if it was not the family, maybe it was the servants and their families living on it. But there were always heaps of children. There was always somebody you could talk to. And mostly there was space you would be able to go to just to be alone. And what we are lacking when we're thinking of nuclear families, in nuclear families, we have to have small houses or small flats because everything else is too expensive for one person to take all the money in. And so the space where you can be alone is not enough. the people you can connect to are not enough because sometimes you just quarrel and you would need another point of view, but then the uncles, the aunties, or the granny is just too far away. So the nuclear family was, regarding evolution, a step back, I think.
It's an interesting way of looking at it to say that it's an evolutionary step backwards.
I would
That is,
say so. I would definitely say that the nuclear family, so modern it might have looked, just getting out of the farms and forming an own family and having a little flat, it was a step backwards concerning personal evolution, because this is the thing why we now have grannies or moms or dads lined up alone in their tiny flat of 28 square meters, looking out of the balcony, being lonely. It's not possible on a big farm or a place where many houses are and a huge family congregates.
very interesting. Okay, so we're looking then at the modern model. So this is across the entire Western world, and my goodness, it's happening in Asia as well. If you look in China and these countries, India as well, even happening now. This migration to the nuclear family it's an explosion. It's an explosion of popularity to be actually doing that. And as you say, the elderly are being completely left out of this picture altogether. But equally, those opportunities for the creative input of many adults to the upbringing of many children is completely lost out of that
Yes,
equation.
yes, usually you say you need a village to educate a child. And how should one parent or two parents do that?
Yeah.
It's impossible.
So where is the village today? This is the question.
Where is
So
the village? And this is another thing where we did a step back in our evolution when we decided to move into towns and to go for the anonymous type of living out of the villages where you would just sit outside of the house and then you would see the neighbor across there and you could just shout, are we going to have a wine or a coffee and how are you? It's gone. Who now has the bank outside of the house looking to the street so that you can communicate in the evening? Just sitting outside the house having a cup of tea or a beer or something. It's gone.
yeah. Well, it's interesting to see why that has happened. Like to actually plot that, because I've spoken to. I'm not sure if this was the case in Germany when you grew up, but I've spoken to English people who lived in what you would only describe as poverty, really, in council flats. So this is government-owned housing. I'm thinking about people in England and places like London, and they would talk about leaving the children out by the front door on the balcony to sleep, to get some air, and there was no fear that the children would be taken or that there would be any violence or anything like that. It was perfectly trusted that everybody in that little community, and they knew everybody in their little community. So these are tiny little flats that we're talking about that these poor people were living in London, say. And that's completely gone. So, today, even I live in the country here in Australia, and there's absolutely no way that anybody would trust anybody with your children out at the front door. There's just no possibility of it. So in 50, 60 years, we've completely lost that. So I suspect that it was the same thing where I grew up as well, although we weren't living jam-packed together. But there seems to be this explosion of fear around our safety. So it's fear for the body, which has limited the opportunity for there to be a community within a community. So to be able to see your high-rise building of apartments, to see it as a community, which 50, 60 years ago, there was much more of an opportunity to do that. Like it was seen much more as a community.
Yes, but we
Fear.
went to this anonymous type of living where you don't even know your neighbors. And even if you look at areas where you have villas, people hardly know their neighbors. Mostly they have a villa in this country and a villa in that country, and the neighbors don't even know when the people are there or not. Yeah, it's going through every scale of income, this anonymous type of living, and this anonymous, the thinking of I am anonymous, therefore I'm free, I'm not controlled, I think is the basis of that.
So this is the delusion, isn't it? Is that
I
by
think
being anonymous, you actually achieve freedom, and you actually achieve being autonomous. That that you are literally heading towards being self-responsible. But it's a delusion, isn't it?
it's not self-responsible, it's just the delusion of not being controlled and being in control oneself. It's about control, not about responsibility.
Okay.
Because if somebody would take responsibility and have a lot of money, they would do it like Amin, who has his mother at home and cares for her, and his brother and cares for him. And the house is full with relatives that cannot care for themselves anymore. And he, the big businessman, is taking care of everything. And even if you remember when we do interviews with him, sometimes it's just noise in the background because he has to keep the door open to see what his family members do. So he's with one ear, he's here, and with one ear, he's there, just taking charge about everything like a good mom would do.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting, and I guess it influenced his way of networking. So he's networking in a very matriarchal way and very successfully. It
So tell
influenced in his lifestyle.
yeah. So tell me about this difference with self-responsibility, because what you and I are talking about to people with the formation of Togetherness, it is the process of becoming deeply self-responsible,
Yeah.
deeply autonomous, but it is in the real way, not this way of hiding. So talk about the experience of being deeply responsible for yourself, and how that then actually links into the natural outflowing of care for others.
I guess if you really, really, really take self-responsibility, you just can't live with the idea that another person is in a bad status or is suffering. It just doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel good. If you're in control of something, this doesn't matter. The needs of the other persons just don't matter. If you are self-responsible, the needs of the other persons begin to matter. It starts with the cooking. If you're cooking for a community, you very often come back to that you don't have any other chance than cooking vegan. But everybody knows that he or she can add on top things what they think is needed by them. So when we cook vegan, the one who is vegetarian can add on some cheese. The one who eats meat add on some meat. But you have to care for the basis and give a basis that everybody can eat. In that case, it's mostly vegan.
So I don't, other than you folk, I don't know anybody who's a vegan, and I don't associate with people who are vegans at all. So if I'm in a community, I would never ever have that issue. That would never be an issue for me.
If you're cooking for the community, because one day you might be cooking for the community, this is an issue I definitely had to solve, because one of the community is vegan. So how to cook for everybody? And the way it developed was giving a base that everybody can share,
Sure.
and give all the toppings that are individual.
I understand the principle of what you're talking about, and so that, you know, it would go for many things. You'd need to be aware of what was the fundamental, the most constrained state of the individuals within the community, and so that what you're looking at is the needs of the most constrained individual, and then everybody, you know, like that would be what you'd be providing for. I get it. I understand that. And the same thing would go for, you know, many areas. So like cultural appetite, the appetite for religious experience, the appetite for music. There would be many, many, many things, art and culture in general, that would come into that. So if you're forming a community, you'd have to look at where were the constraints in terms of what, you know, would be externally considering for all of the individuals that are in there. And, you know, definitely all of those things would be, you know, part of it. So times a day when we're quiet, times of the day when we're not so quiet, all of those things would be a consideration. And it would be the most constrained person that would actually, you know, that would define those things, wouldn't it? Or am I talking off a direction here?
If you start looking at the needs of others, you would definitely begin with the weakest or the most constrained point. Yes, definitely, because you have to include it somehow.
Yeah. So for those people who are very constrained, so like let's think about, you go away from the diet and think about appetite for music, for example.
Yeah.
So what is acceptable in that field? What role is there for everybody in the community to consider everybody else's sort of tastes or so on?
And very interestingly, in our community, the taste of music is very divergent. So it's looked upon that you listen to it in your private time. And if you're outside where everybody can hear the same thing, or you in a room where you can share, and the others need to listen because they just can't escape, I usually ask whether it is okay if I turn on my meditation music now for the next half hour. And the answer obviously can be yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just be aware of that my taste of music is not the taste of music of everybody. And I would ask their consent. Otherwise, I would go in my private room for meditation and listen there privately to my taste of music. Because it's very divergent in this community.
Mm-hmm. Well, I should think it would be, you know, wherever you go. And there's, you know, personally know how difficult it is if you're actually around people who just decide that they want to have whatever it is, the music that they like all of the time, or other cultural things going on. So it's a real issue. When you're looking at the intention for personal evolution, how does that issue that we're just talking about, how does that mesh in then? Why I ask that is that, it could be seen that what a wonderful opportunity for me to grow if I'm going to put up with somebody else having music that I don't like. Perhaps that is the wonderful opportunity for me.
Oh yes, but then somebody, in case I would like to turn on my meditation music, you can just go and say yes, yes, turn it on. I want to hear it and test how I'm reacting today. It would be fine. But there's another thing. If I just turn it on and you don't have no possibility to escape, of course, you can observe your triggers and you can evolve, but it wouldn't feel good. And what we learned here is that the freedom of one person ends where the freedom of the other person begins. And when you know that it is a conflict and that we have conflicting issues, it is better to talk about it and ask consent and accept if it is not.
So the choice to take on something which is unpleasant to you is a personal choice, and whether or not it's being offered to you, it would still be a personal choice, because there would always be the opportunity to confront it, wouldn't there?
Yes, it's I'm going back to cooking because the example is so easy. If there's fruit salad and I just don't like a banana, the one who is doing the fruit salad knows that and can do the fruit salad and put the banana in an extra cup so that everybody who wants the banana can put it into. And even me, if I want to test whether today I can eat banana or not. But so everybody has the possibility to take fruit salad. If they would put the banana in from the beginning,
You're not
then
eating
I
fruit
don't
salad.
have much choice. Then I can skip the fruit salad or not, or eat around the banana and be angry. It's another thing if the choice is so visible.
Okay, so it's about making choices visible.
And it even would make me smile if somebody would do a fruit salad and put the banana in the extra cup and maybe the walnuts in an extra cup for those who are allergic to walnuts. And I would see the caring. Just have a basic fruit salad, which is okay for everybody, and then the add-ons for those who have special needs. It makes caring visible and it makes choice visible. And if it's the day when I want to test myself, why not add the banana topping? And deliberately test it.
So what other ways can people within a community assist you in your personal development, your personal evolution? What other ways?
One of the easiest way is to trigger. To trigger something which you think you cannot cope with, and give you the possibility to either cope with or say this is the limit, and talk it over with the others to see whether there is a possibility for consent in one or the other way. But you have to go for your own standing. You have to reveal your own truth and you have to test it, to discuss it. It's like standing in front of the university and discussing your thesis with whoever comes and has a question. It gives you the possibility to question yourself, to go for self inquiry.
What kind of gifts do you offer to one another in a community? So, like, imagine you've got a bigger community which is focused around personal evolution. What are the gifts that are being offered?
I think the final gift that can be offered is trust, that you come to a point where you are trusted and others trust you. The the knowing that you will be cared for, so that you don't have to question yourself anymore. Are you loved and be cared for or not? What should become natural, or it will become natural at some point. So it helps you enhance your self-image and maybe heal some trauma. You definitely will get more non-violent as time goes by, because the community will educate itself to go that way. You will begin to see some things as not being that important. Even if you come to a point where you're opposed to something, you will ask yourself, is it worth quarreling? Is it worth calling in a meeting and having to oppose to something and having to stand an inquiry? You will ask yourself, is it that important? Or, or is it something which I can let be sooner or later?
Mm. Well, these things that we're talking about with, the example of a Buddha. So if we were to talk about the example of the Buddha, we are, and were we to be Buddhas ourselves, we wouldn't be, um, suffering from stress, and in fact, there would be no suffering, and there would be just awareness and connection and so on. If we're trying to encourage ourselves and provide encouragement to the community to actually head in that direction, what the things that we've been talking about, are they necessarily precursors to that, or are there other steps, or how would you modify the communities to really support that dropping out of suffering?
In a community, you can go for experiments. So I remember the day when I proposed that we go for the experiment to live on one purse. Very challenging. Indeed, a very challenging topic. But you can develop in different ways when you see it as a period of exploration, where you sit down afterwards and say, okay, this happened and that happened, and I was happy, I was not happy, or I could learn to trust. And then you can either go for the next experiment or enlarge that phase of experiment or skip it again. But the communities, I think, give extraordinary range of experimental living.
Mm. I think that's actually,
If you're aware of it and decide for it.
Mm. Yeah, I think for me, the overwhelming benefit of actually being in a community where people are trying to evolve is to experiment. That's the overwhelming real opportunity, so that you can just try stuff out. You can have a go, and have a turn at roles and that sort of thing. And we were talking the other day about the idea of 12 people together and different roles that people can play. And one focus with that is to look at who's going to be cook and who's going to be gardener and who's going to be looking after profit centers and that sort of thing. So that's one way of looking at it. And the wonderful opportunity exists to say, well, look, I'm really comfortable in this role, but how about I do that other role that I'm not really very comfortable about? So perhaps I'm not very comfortable with being the chairman of the business section or something like that, but that's what I'll have a try of doing now. And another person could say, well, I don't like doing the housekeeping, but that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be the person who's looking after the housekeeping. And so that's the beginning of it, as I see it. And then the type of work that was being developed 5-6 years ago when we were looking at these groups of 12 people. A very, very different way of actually approaching it, but it's all experimental again. So, as I was talking about to the the group that Bridget's running, and I was just saying to them, well, look, the whole thing is about being able to have a turn, and for everybody to have a turn indeed. And I thought maybe what we could do is share the screen, and I've got the the connection table, which was developed or sort of came through for myself at the time. It's changed since then, but nonetheless, we don't have to give too much attention to the exact detail, but we can talk about some of the sorts of things that we're looking at here and the way in which it is actually experimental. So I'm going to have a go at sharing my screen. And there we go, I've got the screen shared.
Yes, so, I remember that complex thing.
So this is an experimental structure. And yes. What we've got here is the individual down here. So in this case, it's Neil. So this connection table was one that was developed up by Marianne and myself, but predominantly it was stuff that was coming through to me as to how I would relate to a group of 12 people, myself included. So like I would be part of this. And there's plenty of precedents for this type of thing. But so I'm in the middle here, and we've got these triads. So like that, what I've got running my arrow around here is a triad. Here's another triad. So there's 4 triads in this group. There's actually also 4 tetras. So this is 4 groups, 3 groups of 4. Sorry, 3 tetras. 4 triads, 3 tetras, and they are sort of described down here and this thing on the side, because it was a bit difficult to actually put it all on the one document. But if you look at this person up here who's at 1 o'clock, so directly opposite me is the 12 o'clock position, and we've got 1 o'clock next to it here. And there's a tetra made up of that person, that person, that person, and that person. So it's the 4 of them. It's the 1 o'clock tetra. And so it goes around the clock. So as we go around the clock, you get the 3 tetras, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And these are groupings of people. So in relationship to me, sitting here, this dot, these 3 people over here have a relationship around my purpose. So they have a role to play in assisting me with my purpose. And this idea of the first, the second, and the third is a Gurdjieff concept where we're saying that somebody is going to propose, and this would be this person here, the first. Somebody is going to question or deny or, in some way provide a second force. And then there would be a third person in the middle here who would actually do the reconciliation or the balancing or the harmonizing, however you want to look at it. And that's in relationship to what's going on here for me. So like we're talking about Neil, and these 3 people here are going to provide input to me around my purpose. And this one's going to propose stuff, and this one is going to, deny stuff or question stuff. And this person here is going to reconcile the 2 of them, bring harmony and balance, bring the third force in, as they say. And obviously, if we turn the circle around and we look at this person here, this person could, we could move the whole clock around so that this person would move to here, and then they would have their own triad of these people. And the notion is that every single person within this group of 12 get to have a turn at doing all of these roles. So, you know, whether it's around, you know, navigation and community, or around these love topics here, or whether it's around the teaching and knowledge stuff around here, and whether it's around change, this group here, whatever it is, everybody can have a turn at it. Now, this would be an example of moving, you know, beyond let's challenge, you know, something about whether we're coping with music or not. This would be an opportunity to, you know, provide questioning and variance and variability and all of those things on a grand scale by working with a group of 12 people. So some of these tetras are pretty highfalutin. So, you know, we've got Zoroaster, Buddha and Ali and the earth or the sun in that tetra. So that's a very lofty influence for an individual to have. And over here, interestingly enough, is a tree. So Tani Mahota is a tree. But I know a lot of this kind of work that I did early on. I did a lot of work with a shark, a great white shark that I became very friendly with. I did a lot of work with a field of grain and so on. So it doesn't have to only be humans which would be involved in these groups. So I just put this up. I was just sharing it really for the purpose.
We have a question here.
Okay.
Is this meant that we all could take over jobs? Yes, and we all can take over jobs for the others. So when you are in a community, you will be in a certain position for others always, and then you serve that job.
And the key thing here in terms of what I'm looking at here is for everybody else in the community, you would take one of these roles.
Mm-hmm.
You would take a role for everybody. Not the same for every other person, but it would be different for every person, in fact. And this is the true experimental thing. This is where you begin to learn about yourself. Because when you're outside, like, what are we talking about here? We're talking about really getting outside of the comfort zone. This is super, super, super out of the comfort zone. You know, I'm going to let somebody else do proposing around what my purpose is. That is uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It is really uncomfortable. And there's heaps of these. Like, this is only one of them. This is only just one example. Just one example.
It's one example of many. And maybe we have to just focus a bit on that there are always three forces. One will be proposing, one will be opposing, one will be reconciling. And you're not always in the same position. So sometimes you propose something, sometimes another person will oppose to that, and the third person will instantly jump into the reconciliation thing, mostly. We are designed for that somehow. And you're not always in the same position.
Not in an ideal world, or not in an ideal community, not in an ideal way of actually evolving, is
Yes,
that
and
if we're going to be in a community, we get to take these roles and
yes,
to
and maybe just as Günther told us, and it was a German speaker, so you didn't really hear him. He talked a lot about according to your talents and according to your inner voice, there's a place that is designed for you, where you will be very happy in the sense of purpose of life. And once you find that place, no matter how complicated or easy or exposing or not exposing or important or not important that is, you will just be happy with that. And communities, because they are so supporting, can give you the opportunity to find that place. So maybe,
I would
though you are an IT specialist, your inner design is connecting to the nature and the animals in the nature that are living around here and are parasitic to the plants. And maybe you are the one to talk to them and find equilibrium with nature and plants. And in a community, it's easier to discover that than living alone in a flat, having a job and going there each day.
So I think what Gunther was talking about is absolutely the thing. So like each border is different. They're not all the same, and this has definitely been what I've observed with saints is that they're not like it's not a cookie cutter. They don't all end up being the same, not remotely. There's all kinds of individuality in there, but the capacity to be able to fulfill all of these kinds of roles that we're talking about. So like I've just shown 12 roles in that connection table, but there would be many, 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 many more roles which can all be experimented with and worked with. And to be a saint, you need to be able to fulfill all of those roles. You need to be able to actually do all of them, even though your nature. So as Gonda's talking about, the place that you come back to, which is really central, which is you, is still you. The fact that you're competent to fulfill all of these other roles as well is just what it is.
Yes, it's just being a resource for others and having the possibility to jump in and to evolve in a position that is not too comfortable. Just gives you triggering, it gives you the possibility to grow. But then when you go back to serving the community, you will naturally go back to the position where you serve best.
Mm.
So it's an equilibrium between serving yourself and serving the others, evolving yourself, evolving in the community as a community.
Well, it's a curious thing because there's another way of looking at that, and that would be that the evolution would necessarily come through the service. So what we're talking about here, being able to actually fulfill all of these roles which are uncomfortable. So they're just not natural to us. They're uncomfortable, or we're uncertain where we are with them. But getting to a place where through service you become competent with each of them, then the evolution would occur as a byproduct. So it's not necessarily a goal in itself. It would be a byproduct of it.
So I'm just thinking of when visitors are here. We have here a community which is very much based on quiet, being quiet, all quiet around, having the cats around, being in a position where it's the single house up the hill, all quiet, very quiet. And you know Gaio. Gaio sometimes, in a very Greek way, just comes visiting, and the best he can do is sending an SMS 10 minutes before he arrives. So no possibility to prepare anything, no possibility to finish a job and then prepare for Gaio. You just have to be able to jump. And so in the community, we realized that Ike is very good to keep Gaio a bit distant till I can do the cooking and Sandra can set up the house and the table for a visitor to come in. And after 2 times Gaio coming, we now know how to handle it. So the cats and Ike go outside, greeting Gaio, giving space for Sandra and me to do the things. And so we all feel good. But me having go out to give space for the others to take care for the food and the table wouldn't work that good. I could do it. I know I can. But it was way out of my comfort zone. Would mean personal growth, but would be quite constraining for the team because the others are not that comfortable with cooking.
So this is an interesting thing. So what you're talking about is the role that you're choosing to take at the time is about supporting the other people. So supporting them. But, perhaps at some future or, like as it all evolves, then there would be, more and more encouragement for everybody to try different roles in a way which is actually really supporting them without it killing them.
Yes, the moment I guess we are very good in handling intruders, we could go for experimenting and then just say, knowing the intruder will come in 10 minutes, we say, okay, today we're going for an experiment, which means we shift roles. I go out giving the space.
Yep.
Eike is going to do the finishing of the house and setting the table, and Sandra is doing the cooking, which is the discomfort place for everybody. But it would be some fun experimenting.
Only one way to find out.
Only one way to find out is to do it. But I still think the community-based approach of living is giving you the courage to do things like that. Not always jump into the position which is natural for you, but maybe become so resilient as a group that you can decide as a group, there's a possibility we are going to experiment today.
Mm-hmm.
But it's up to the resilience of the group. So it has to be a good day for everybody.
Yeah. Look, what you're talking about here is a lot of kindness and a lot of understanding of each other and consideration and all that type of thing. What role is there in actually having people in your community who are just downright difficult to be with?
You think when somebody comes who is difficult, or when somebody stays who is difficult, or
All
if
the time.
somebody of ourselves is difficult? What did you mean?
Well, it could be ourselves, like we could be the difficult person. What I'm thinking about was Gurdjieff, when he was running Fontainebleau. He always had a fellow there who was disagreeable to everyone. So nobody found him likable. And Gurdjieff, when he was questioned about this, he said his role is to stand on people's feet. Stand on their toes was the expression. But
Yes. When I think of yesterday and today, it's extremely stressful days for myself. Lots of appointments, a lot of life things to do, a lot of work in between the life things, and nearly no possibility to retreat and have a minute for myself. So I guess till tonight, I'm the uncomfortable person. And the others won't have it too easy, so I know about it. I will tend to retreat, but there will not be much possibility. So one way or the other, they have to cope with the stressed Marianne. So they can make jokes about it, to remind me of it. They just could hand me a glass of wine over if Gaia wouldn't have drunken every bit of wine. So I would realize, oh, I'm complicated today. There would be the possibility of consciously triggering me so that I can awake and see, oh, I'm stressed out. Maybe it's better not to eat, better to meditate and then eat later, or not eat totally.
Well, it's interesting what we're talking about here, because people listening, they might be confused and they think, well, are they talking about manipulating each other? and
No,
that's
no.
certainly not my intention. And if you're talking about let's trigger, it's triggering without manipulation because you get no expectation of what the outcome will be. The outcome could be anything, but it's an experiment.
It's in the real sense, it stays totally experimental. And yes, there are times when we just know that this day is going to be complicated for one or the other person. And then you know that you won't see the best version of that person that day. But you don't expect it to be.
That's that's an interesting thing in its own right. That idea of what is the best version of a person, and whether or not you're going to experience that during that day. And like everybody has this experience, they know that people around them, they have good days and they have some days that aren't quite so good. If you're in a community, then you're much closer to that. Of course, you can't hide. Right?
Yes, you can't hide, and then you just know. When I'm a medical person, I know that there's a biorhythm. You're not on the top of your body each day. You're not on the top of your spirits each day. It's just not possible. There's a rhythm. And sometimes you're just flat because the body rhythm is very down, the spirits are very down, and the emotional level is down. And on that day, it just needs a thing and you're triggered.
Mm.
And then it depends on the community to know that there are days like that when you need more sleep, when you are not that efficient. And in a nucleus family, this is not that much cared for.
Now, all that would happen is that people are frightened. So people will be frightened of, say, a grumpy mum or a grumpy dad or something like that. Or,
Yeah.
you get people who are frightened of their children, like they're going to, you've got to be careful. You don't want to stimulate them in this way or that way because they'll go crazy and then we'll have to live with them. We'll have to put up with them how they are. In a community, it's not quite the same because there isn't, it isn't quite the same.
Yes, and again, there's more experimental field for yourself just to realize and learn about body rhythm or soul rhythm or emotional rhythm and just have a look at it and diagnose so that you can see what the level is a person is in.
Mm.
And if somebody is in high spirit, yes, of course, you can talk, you can ask for things, but if somebody is in very low spirit, yet just don't ask for it that day. It gives a lot of possibility to learn about patience.
Mm. Mm.
Sometimes there is a bad need for talking, but you realize that the other person is not in the position to talk. So sometimes it's not even okay to say there is the need of talking. Sometimes you even have to wait for that to place and then to ask when possibly the best time would be for talking. In a nucleus family, you would just go on quarreling and one would chase the other. Normally.
And I suspect the same thing happens in most communities as well. Is that the people get manipulated and chased and there's all kinds of power and dominance going on and so.
Yes, but then you have to watch the intention with the intention with that you go into the community. If you go into a community only with the thought, I don't want to be lonely anymore, and you just happen to have that day when everybody needs a private space, That's very bad, because you
Mm.
will begin to chase the other people and they will get angry. If you would be in a community where you know it's all about to be Buddha by Friday, then you would realize, oh, this is the day. This is the day with the private for everybody. Oof, I'm training private today.
Mm. Mm.
I'm training solitude today. You would take it in another way.
You're talking there about like the massive need for confronting things and talking. So this would be like a pretty general, um, thing for a community, like a community of people trying to evolve, at least anyway. Is that there's a need to actually be working on the community. So in other words, working on the needs of the community, but also working on your skills as a community person. In other words, developing your abilities. And obviously all of that experimental work that we were talking about there before, with all these tetras and triads and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's a huge piece of that. Huge piece of that.
If you think of communities like Tamara in Portugal, it started with 12 people who decided that they want to explore what is necessary to have a peace-based community. And so they started experimenting what is needed. And they had the community growing. Now there are 250 people, lots of land, all very cultivated, everybody working together. And in the last 20 years, they had a complex ongoing experiment. And what they had as an outcome is that they are not able to have a peaceful community if they don't look very close on the relation of people that constitute that community. And of course, they had a lot of breaking up relations, and they had jealousy, and they by growing Tamara and having the focus on peace, 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 they developed a community that is polyamorous and polygamic. So they allowed themselves to drop the idea of possession of a human being. And they allowed total diversity, founded groups for women and men who suffer from jealousy. They look upon it as an illness that needs to be treated and has all rights to be treated and has all rights to be looked upon as important. And everybody is allowed to do what he or she wants or not wants. So we have highly monogamic people in a polygamic, polyamorous society who just learned how to cope with it.
Mm-hmm. So they allowed all that diversity. Yeah. So they got to a place where they could manage that extended diversity around them. Yeah.
But the whole experiment started with the intention why they wanted to form a community. And it was about finding out what peace is constituted of. So they got very deep into the patriarchal things, they got deep into the matriarchal things. They saw that they had to overcome both things and find something beyond patriarchy and matriarchy. It's very interesting to talk to those two people, Dr. Doom and Sabine Lichtenfeld. It's very interesting. Such a long way of development.
Well, I've got a lot of experience.
All done by a community who intentionally found themselves for exploring how we can live in peace on earth. And they went through a lot of suffering in between.
Very good. I know we shouldn't perhaps look at this example and be expecting a particular outcome. But what would your impression be of the spiritual growth of people involved in that community?
Those who are really deeply involved in Tamera and live many years there, they are highly spiritual beings, very non-violent, very sharing people. You're impressed by the love they express as a person. Inspiring, really inspiring for me.
So it's an example of something that's has really worked very, very well. Yeah, there's plenty of communities that haven't worked at all and end up in very corrupt circumstances, and not necessarily started with worse intentions. I can think of communities one community near to where I grew up in Auckland in New Zealand, which was it was founded on high intention. It was founded on very high intention, but power and dominance and sex and all that kind of stuff got in the way, and it got very polluted. To the point where there was tremendous harm being committed against people. So it's all manipulation and power and all that type of stuff based, really.
When I was talking with Sabine Lichtenfels, and I was talking about that topic with her, she said that they found it necessary, as time did go by, that half of the day they were working and half of the day they committed to communication within the community. So a huge time was spent on the development of the community and the persons within the community. And I think if you miss out on that, you're done. Then the chief features, the negative chief features, can kick in unwatched.
So if you've got 250 people in a community, it's a very big community, and it's very free and open in the way that you're talking about, extremely free, all of that liberty that's actually available there. How are they managing to keep it safe for everyone? How are they managing to do that when there's so much freedom and liberty?
By talking, actually by talking. They have a very clear setup for eating at certain times, and there are rules that you have to change the table each day and to connect to those people you are on the table with. And they have their talking groups each day. They have people who look after those who are emotionally disturbed, and every conflict is solved, is taken to be important, and is solved. They don't leave anything open, untouched, neglected. They don't do it.
How much hierarchy is there in Tamera?
I haven't been there personally, so I cannot really talk. It is very much influenced by the two founders, Dieter Dohm and Sabine Lichtenfels. It reminds me of an ashram which is run by a couple, where he does the teaching and she does the caring. And everything is looked upon, everything is observed, everything is watched. Somebody is always aware. It's the same thing, but it's not about a mental hierarchy. Then if there is a hierarchy, I expect it to be a hierarchy according respect and personal evolution and maybe connection.
Okay, that's just very interesting, because what we're proposing with these togetherness structures is that there's no hierarchy at all, and there is no leaders, there's no followers. It's just everybody. It's just a community, and of course, this is the great experiment that that we're engaged in with this attempt that we're taking, and to do that without any hierarchy, um, is a real. It's a really interesting experiment.
I think if you really drop hierarchy, you will still reflect upon experience. And you still will turn to those who experimented 10 years longer. Just ask them, how did you do it? Did you ever meet a problem in yourself like that? How did you handle it? It's just the way you would talk to a grandpa or a great grandpa. And it would be you would feel respect towards that person. You wouldn't feel a patriarchal hierarchy, but maybe you would behave different out of personal respect
Mm-hmm.
to what already is achieved in a person.
Yep. Well, it's all about not manipulating and not actually working from power, obviously, for the individual. If somebody chooses to have respect for another person, then that's their choice and that's what they're doing. It's certainly interesting. And for me, it's actually part of that role thing. And, the natural, um, the natural place of somebody who's good at something will be to be good at something. That's what the natural place for them.
It's like the permaculture guys say, don't take the strongest if you look for a leader, take the capable and take the one who will take the responsibility, not the power.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt about it. Power and dominance are the two that really are destructive in people who have influence. Extremely destructive. And the other chief features, negative chief features that we talk about, they all have a role. And there's a reason why we've got 12 people in these circles, is because of the 12 chief features, and we get the opportunity to actually express and experience and understand, how all of that operates. Very good. Well, I think we've probably covered off a fair bit there, Marianne. Have you got some questions coming in?
No, there are no questions coming in. And I guess, yes, it's at least we covered the topic where we can say when you want to found a community, take a close look on your intention. Why do you want to found the community? What is your personal driver? What is the driver for the others? What do they want to experience? There might be 12 people very, very happy in a community where they just want to have the possibility to work less and have more fun.
Mm-hmm.
But then don't add in a person that goes for personal development. If you want to found a community for personal development, if you want to explore on a very specific topic like Tamara, how is it possible to really achieve peace within and without, don't take in a person whose only intention is to float around. And don't take any effort on personal development. It just won't work that good. So it's about if you want to found a community, take a topic, know what you're heading for, and find the people who resonate to that. Which might not be your best two girlfriends.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be surprising.
Well, you don't know, of course, when you go into these things in the beginning of a community as to, the answer to some of those questions, but you can certainly have an intention. And if the intention is to evolve, so personal development and then personal evolution, if that's your intention and you're strong, yeah, that's what I want to do, then what will come will be what will be necessary for you, without a doubt. But what you're talking about, the idea of people just floating into, because it's convenient, that could be a recipe for things being very tricky.
Yeah.
That being very, very tricky. Well, look, I truly do think that we've actually got through, some interesting points there. So thank you very much, Marianne. And and we'll continue this conversation another day. We'll look into, some diverse aspects of forming a community.
Yes, I think we still have to cover the topics of plants, of animals, of entities, because now we only did evaluate a human community.
Yeah. Well, look, I was thinking when you were talking about your community there, people, they'll be thinking, "Crikey, there's only 3. Hang on a minute, there's all those cats. They're all a part of the community." And indeed the way that actually works, and the rights and the needs and the wishes of the animals that are involved in that community, critical, absolutely critical.
And we really found that the animals we are 3 humans here who treat the animals really seriously, and we all talk with them, and we all watch their needs, and they evolve extremely.
Mm.
They are experimental now themselves, and they really develop strong characters. And it's nice to see.
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
Very
Well,
nice.
we'll definitely have another conversation about these communities, such as the community within our body, so all of the microbiome and so on, and the lessons that actually come out of what we're talking about here, in terms of how, when we go inwards and actually see that community, how we can actually take roles. So how we can let the fungi in our body take a different role than the one it's been taking. So how about letting it be the teacher? How about letting it be the one who's going to be the denying force? So we'll propose things. We'll have something else propose, and we'll see what happens when the candida actually is given the opportunity and is encouraged to actually be the denying force, or the reconciling force for that matter. So we'll have a look at all of that, and then we'll have a look at how we're sitting in this invisible community as well. That's what you're talking about. So the community of non-physical beings that surround us, and for most people it's completely invisible to them, and it's something that they'd rather it wasn't there. And not only is it invisible, but we're just hoping that it will go away. but the opportunities that exist to actually see, well, hang on a minute, how do we go about actually having a harmonious community that involves all of these beings, whether it be trees or plants or the microbes or whatever else.
I have an interesting thing to add in, because we here quite focus on animals. We focus mostly on the cats. But we have the mountain vipers here, the mountain vipers, very poisonous snakes. And slowly, as the snakes see that we are very nice with animals, they get trusty to humans. So we had a snake sitting 5 meters in front of the house, just lying in the sun, very comfortable. And if I look at the snake and the snake looks at me, this is not that fear in between anymore. And I next time I will try just to pass the snake by, going slowly, and see how she behaves, whether she still can sit without considering me. It's interesting what's beginning to happen.
It's fascinating. Like, and really, this truly is another topic for another day. But you know, I've been, you know, here where I'm living, we've got a tremendous number of very, very poisonous spiders, and I've been doing the same thing with the spiders. I've actually been seeing them and allowing them to see me, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing is possible. It's all possible. All these things, just a matter of having the intention. So if your intention is for a community or to be learning from one another and taking roles and experimenting, then that's what will happen. For sure, that's what will happen.
Yes.
So you'll have a snake out in your garden, even if you don't like snakes in the past. So that's what'll happen.
Yes, or Sandra called me because a centipede entered the house and began to hide behind the kitchen, and she was so scared about the centipede. And I just talked to the centipede and said, "Let's centipede, we need to go out of the house." And I just took things to take it out of the house, and the centipede came. I could take it, put it out.
Yeah, for people watching, these centipedes in Greece are actually highly poisonous. They're very poisonous.
Yeah, highly, highly poisonous.
Interesting, and so interesting. You know, we're talking about these animals which, you know, have a habit of harming humans. Like these spiders, they bite you, and they're pretty nasty things. That shark that I was talking about earlier is a killer. You know, my original conversations with him was I was asking, was he the shark or one of the sharks that had been eating the swimmers? And he was convinced that he was. Like, you know, he's happy to share that he was. And that doesn't stop him becoming a part of a community. You know, the fact that he eats humans is just part of what he does.
Yes. Just don't get near to him when he is hungry. Not so wise then.
Absolutely. Yeah, you just don't walk past his mouth. Not when he's 6 meters long.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, look, thank you so much. And as I say, like, we will continue this conversation another day. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.